Hello, bosses, and welcome to today's Power Lunch with Tiffany Dufu. I am so excited to have you joining me. I'm Emilie Aries, the founder and CEO of Bossed Up, where we help women navigate career transition and beat burnout. Today is part of our Fierce Fall Challenge, the 10-week campaign that we just launched last week to help many of you and all of us Bossed Up women tackle the biggest single goal between now that we have for the rest of the year in these 10 weeks between now and Thanksgiving. So if you haven't checked it out already, join for free at bossedup.org/fiercefall. And I want to welcome all the bosses who are joining us today from all over the country who are engaged in our Fierce Fall campaign. And I want to just get our chat bar started today by asking you to share what your Fierce Fall goal is. So tell us a little bit about where you're tuning in from today and what you are striving for in this season of change. It is such an exciting time for me to sit down with incredible female leaders like Tiffany for power lunch conversations like this one. Essentially, Tiffany and I are just going to have a casual conversation as though we're having lunch or sharing lunch, which I know many of you have your brown bags at your desk right now and are doing just that. So way to make that part of your day purpose-driven. And this is an exciting feature of the Fierce Fall campaign because we get to talk with women who've crafted their careers with passion and purpose. And so I want to welcome Tiffany to join us today. Tiffany, as you may know, is the Chief Leadership Officer at the Levo League, and she has made it her mission to advance women and girls throughout her career. And this is long before the Levo League, right? She was the president of the White House Project, where she helped fill the political pipeline with more women leaders, and has raised over $20 million to further this cause. She was on the launch team for Lean In. She sits on the board of directors for the Girl Scouts of America and has been named 20 Women to Watch alongside women like Hillary Clinton by the Huffington Post. So really, Tiffany, it is such a pleasure to welcome you to the Bossed Up community and welcome you to today's Power Lunch. Thanks so much for tuning in.
Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. And so, Tiffany, you're joining us from New York today, right?
That's right, from Harlem.
Awesome. Well, I want to start off by asking you this question because one thing that became completely apparent when I started reading and watching more of what you've been up to throughout your career is that you have a crystal clear personal mission to advance the cause of women and girls. It's clearly informed many of your professional and personal choices in life. And I wanted to ask you, for a lot of our women, where at Bossed Up, we really focus on helping us navigate those murky waters and those key inflection points at the start of our careers to figure out how to pursue sustainable career paths that'll keep us thriving and striving for the long term. How did you come up with or settle on or gain such clarity around your personal mission?
Well, sure. I always start off by saying exactly what you just said, which is that my life's work is advancing women and girls. That's pretty much why I'm on the planet. So my life is simple. I know what's on my tombstone, and I'm just kind of project managing my life backwards. And right now, I feel really lucky that I get to execute my purpose as Chief Leadership Officer. But as you mentioned, pretty much every professional job that I've had, that's been my highest purpose and my highest allegiance, whether I was starting a girls' middle school, whether I was working at Simmons College, which is a women's college in Boston, whether I was running this national women's leadership organization, whether I'm on the launch team for Lean In or working for a technology company. How I came to such clarity about my passion and purpose comes from a number of different places, all of which every single person has access to. So the first is just my personal experience, and I could name several of them, but I'll just share one personal experience. I grew up in the church, and my father was the pastor of the church when I was growing up. And one day in Sunday school, I was reprimanded by a teacher after I volunteered to pray at the end of the Sunday school class. She asked for a volunteer. I was a preacher's kid. I felt I was qualified.
Sure.
But afterwards, she informed me that I wasn't supposed to have done that, that there were boys in the class and that it was boys that were supposed to lead the prayer. And lo and behold, that was the day that I found out what our church doctrine taught about women and women's leadership and women's roles. Obviously, I was devastated, but it planted a very early experience for me and an early seed in terms of my feminism and in terms of my real clarity about what I wanted to do. So we all have personal experiences and different parts of our narrative that we can tap into that makes that important. We also have our experiences. I'm the oldest of four girls, and my youngest sister just graduated from the University of Denver last year. So when I say I'm like the big sister, I've been the big sister like in so many ways, so long. So it's just very natural for me to want to support women and to be addicted to their journeys and how they've evolved and what we can do. But I think the other piece, and I don't always say this answer publicly, but I think it's an important answer, is I'm passionate about advancing women and girls because I'm good at advancing women and girls. Anna Fells has this really great book called Necessary Dreams that I encourage everybody to read. And the most important part of this book for me is that it defines ambition in a way that no one else really has, which is that ambition is a desire to achieve mastery of your craft combined with the desire to receive public recognition for it. And in the book, she argues that part of the reason why women are often ambivalent about their ambition is because we're very comfortable with the first part, with the mastery of the craft, but we're not as comfortable because we're not socialized to be comfortable with really wanting and seeking that public recognition. But I think that the relationship between ambition and passion is really important because if you haven't gotten good at something, it's hard to be passionate about it.
Right.
Passion, unless you have just something life-changing, maybe an illness or something major that happens in your family that just makes you very staunch, this is going to be my passion and purpose. Right. Oftentimes you arrive at your passion from just being really good. And I believe in a growth mindset. I believe in Carol Dweck's work. So getting really good just means doing it a lot.
Right.
And practicing a lot. And that's one of the things that I encourage people to do when they're thinking about, like, what is my passion? How do I find that? How do I find my purpose? Is to just go back in your own narrative and to think about the times when you really excelled and you did well. What were you doing? There's likely a very close correlation between that and what you might be able to do in the world to make it a better place.
So well said, Tiffany. And I think of some advice I read last week, actually, which reminded me of Dweck's work. And I don't know if you're hearing an echo from me right now. Are you hearing an echo? No. Okay.
A little bit, but just no big deal.
Okay, great. Well, the headline said, "Don't start a business, become obsessed with something." And it sort of reminds me of Carol Dweck's work, which is like, the greatest masters of music and art and whatever were obsessed with their craft and they practiced their craft. And that kind of excelling at what you're good at, it's an iterative process, but it comes with that obsession and with that willingness to dare to spend your time doing something that you love, hopefully. It's a privilege, too. That's great. And just to answer Maura's question, to repeat the book title that you mentioned, that was Necessary Dreams, right?
That's correct. Necessary Dream, and the author's last name is Fells, F-E-L-S.
Great. And I'll make sure to email all of this out in our follow-up email to those of you who are joining us. Thank you so much, Tiffany. Now, some of what you mentioned boils down to the choices we make as individuals, right? And focusing in on your life's purpose through your values. Values is expressed through choice moments in our lives. And what I find most incredible about your astronomical rise in leadership, if I may say so myself, because really, and I want to make sure all the bosses on the line know, we are talking to an incredibly accomplished female leader here, Tiffany, or leader period, I should say. The work you've done already on your time on this planet is just so impressive. And what I find most impressive is that all of us come from hardship in one way or another, right? We all are handed a certain deck of cards with which we are born. And your mission is so driven by taking charge of your destiny. So I just want to read this to get it correct, to make sure I have this correct. Your mother became pregnant with you in her teens, and she having grown up in Los Angeles, you say in one generation, your parents, quote, broke a vicious cycle of poverty, addiction, and violence. Mm-hmm. And what I feel is most impressive about where you are today is that fact, is that background, is where you come from. And I think a lot of us get this impression, whether it's because we believe in a fixed trait mindset or whatever, that the halls of leadership are out of our reach because of where we come from or because of where we are born. Can you just tell us more about how your parents made that happen, and or what lessons you drew from that history and from your recent history and from your parents' examples?
Yes, absolutely. I think the most important lesson that I learned from my parents and from what they essentially did, which is uproot their family in order to provide a just completely different opportunity and experience for their children, is something that they used to always say to me, which is, Tiffany, if you want something that you've never had before, you're going to have to do something that you've never done before in order to get it. So my parents really believed in taking risks, which is so incredibly important if you're ever going to achieve, what you want to. And I'll share with you a story, because you talked about my parents, that I think is also really important in the context of just manifesting your dreams and your goals. Years ago, I have a daughter. I have a son who's 9. I have a daughter who's 6. And when I was pregnant with my daughter, although I didn't know that it was a girl at the time, I was talking to my dad about what I most wanted for this child, what my hopes or my ambitions were for him or her, which was very bold of me, because I normally don't like to impose my own, dreams onto my kids. And I asked my dad, because it was this sentimental moment, Daddy, when Mom was pregnant with me, what did you hope for me? And my dad got very quiet. I almost thought I heard him crying. And I tried to retract the question and say, oh, it's okay, I'm so sorry. He said, no, he said, I want to answer your question. He said, it's just that I'm embarrassed of my answer. I said, Daddy, I said, how could you be embarrassed about what you wanted for me when Mom was pregnant with me? It had to have been something positive.
Right.
It was, he said, my hope for you when your mom was pregnant with you was that you would graduate from high school and not get pregnant. He said, Tiffany, I'm so embarrassed because the woman that you are today, I didn't know women like you existed when your mom was pregnant with you, that I just hoped. And that was a very important moment for me, just in my leadership and in my life, because what I realized, even though I'd always given my parents a lot of credit for where I was today and for what they taught me, I realized that they were manifesting a reality that they couldn't precisely see.
Right.
They couldn't necessarily see the outcome. They couldn't necessarily see the goal. And I think that's important, because we all have dreams and we all have things that we want to accomplish. And people often tell us to be focused on the dream. But I was watching this Office Hours with Janet Mock yesterday, who's phenomenal. You should go to Levo.com and watch her Office Hours. And one of the things she said that reminded me about this conversation with my dad is that don't believe the hype of the dream. Believe in the process of achieving the dream. Right? Don't believe in the hype of the dream. Believe in the process of achieving the dream. And that's what my parents taught me, that it's all about the evolution. It's all about the process. It's all about getting into that. You might have a goal of being a CEO. You might have a goal of being the president. You might have these dreams. But make sure that you're valuing the journey along the way, because you actually don't know where you might end up. And you might be like my dad and end up with an outcome that's far beyond your wildest imaginations.
Exactly. I love it. And it's like you are reading our playbook right now when it comes to Fierce Fall. I watched some of Janet Mock's interview. It was amazing. And what's amazing to me, because I'm a huge data nerd, just for full disclosure, and research junkie, is that there's no, that's not hyperbole, right? That's not fluff. Those statements are so reflected in all of the research on long-term goal attainment. right? And that's what we actually launched in today's challenge as a part of the Fierce Fall campaign. Week 1 was all about dreaming really big, but crafting smart goals. And week 2, this week, is all about crafting your roadmap to success. Because you're right, if we focus too much on the dream and not on the journey, we're missing the mark completely. And it's a fascinating balance between the head and the heart of like dreaming big and going for something you love deep down, while also rationally sort of walking through the process analytically. In my experience with Bossed Up, I found that some of us lean way heavier towards the process and the analytical component, and others lean way further to the other side when it's about big dreams. And I think we can all learn from that wonderful story. Dream really audaciously and big, and then get to work on the process. And that's the balance to strike. I love it. Wonderful. So I just want to pause here. And yeah, we're getting some incredible comments coming in privately to our presenters. Thank you, Naomi. Make sure that when you're chatting in the chat bar here, you can click send to everyone so we can all see them too, because that's why we can converse and continue the conversation here and on Twitter with our hashtag #FierceFall. Now, Tiffany, I have one more big question for you. At Bossed Up, we believe that work, love, and wellness are intimately intertwined, that we can't really separate our life from our work because there is no magic line that we cross over when you walk into the office and become a totally different person. And I love seeing in your video and your conversations and your copy online that you believe in being yourself at work, because it just makes things easier in some ways. It's easier to be authentic when you bring your full passion and when we can align our lives in that way. And I really couldn't agree more. The question for me is, how do we manage that in today's world? How can we make that possible? And luckily, there's great organizations like Levo that are helping millennial women navigate that process and in crafting a purpose-driven career. But can you tell us more about that philosophy of yours and any advice you have for women on the line who believe in that but are having trouble achieving that?
Yes. So, I mean, I think your question is about two things. One is about
Sure.
authenticity and just being who you are and being comfortable with that and exercising that and executing that in whatever part of your life. And that part of the question, my aha moment came years ago. I was in one of those touchy-feely work retreats where you're paired off with somebody
Yeah.
and you're asked to share what you most value about your colleague. And I was paired off with that. What he most valued about working with me was that I was quirky. And I was really offended because I showed up to work every day in a suit. I was all about business. I was all about the strategy. And I felt that the word quirky really undermined my authority and my credibility in the workplace, and that to me, it felt like he wasn't taking me seriously. And so later that evening, I was talking to a group of colleagues and I was sharing with them about my experience, and I work with them as well. And I was still upset about it. So I was like literally rolling my neck. I was like, and can you believe he said I was quirky? And there was dead silence at the table. And finally, one of my colleagues said to me, Tiffany, you are kind of quirky. But we love that about you. We love that about you. Now, lo and behold, I know that if you ask any of my real friends, is Tiffany quirky? They would say yes. Let's start with my man crush on the Incredible Hulk and the fact that I wear strawberry shortcake pajamas. But never mind any of that. When I came through the door to work, I was my professional self. And what I realized that day was I was failing miserably at trying to be something that I really wasn't anyway. And when I thought about all of the time and the energy that I spent pouring into like managing this brand of Tiffany, when I came into work that wasn't even aligned with who I really was, when people could completely see through it anyway.
Right.
I thought, you know what, forget it then. Everybody's just going to get the same Tiffany, right? My kids are going to get the same Tiffany. My husband's going to get the same Tiffany. These people at work, everybody's just going to get one Tiffany, and she's going to be quirky, and she's going to be real, and she's going to be her.
Right.
And I have to say, it has been so refreshing, and my leadership has had so much more clarity, and I've been so much more successful since I was just me wherever I was. Now, we can have another conversation about perception in the workplace and your
Right.
and how you manage that, because you can't go all out, right? If part of being me is having purple hair, that kind of wouldn't work for a Black woman trying to be successful in a lot of environments.
Right.
But there is something about your personality and being who you are that I think is really important. Now, the other part of your question was really more about when you said, how do you manage it all? It is almost a work-life question about how do you manage being your authentic self when there are so many different parts of your life that you
Right.
show up and be present for and be present to. And I'm sensitive to that because I have 2 kids. I need to show up and be present for them. I have a marriage. I need to show up and be present for that. I have a public speaking practice. So I literally need to show up and be present for that. I need to be
Right.
present for my team at Levo. I need to be present for every single nonprofit board that I sit on. I need to be present for my friends. I need to be, so in so many different ways, I need to be that and be fully that, and that can get exhausting. I'm actually writing a book about my journey of kind of being the queen of domesticity and controlling everything and being perfect and trying to do all these different things to different people, and where I am right now, which is basically at a place where I've embraced imperfection. It's
Great.
called Drop the Ball, How Women Can Achieve More by Doing Less.
Oh my
But
God,
the
love.
bottom line is that I have it all. And when I say have it all, I mean I have really amazing, awesome kids who I think are going to grow up to be global citizens. They don't always turn on their homework on time, but they're like
Sure.
really great kids. I have a really juicy marriage. I have a career that's in alignment with my purpose. I'm healthy and I'm fit. And on most days, I'm joyful. My house isn't perfectly clean, but in general, when people talk about having it all, I have
Yeah.
it all. But my secret is that I don't do it all, right?
Mm-hmm.
I get help, and I have lots of help. And there was a point in my career where I couldn't afford to pay any of the help. So I had to creatively figure out ways to get the support that I needed to be successful as a leader. And so that would be my kind of the bigger answer to the larger
Yeah.
question around managing it all is, please don't try to do that.
Right.
And need the support of other people who love you and want you to be your best self,
Absolutely.
or who have a vested interest in your well-being or the well-being of people that you care about, even if they don't think of themselves as a member of your village. And I'm recruiting them constantly. So, for example, I have a neighbor who lives above me. I live in Harlem in New York City. It's not like a rural community where everybody knows each other and people
Right. Right.
and one day my kids were coming up the stairs, my neighbor was coming up too, and they used Mr. to acknowledge him. They were like, Mr. Jones, that's not his name, I won't say his actual name, Mr. Jones, how are you? And he turns around and he looks at them and he says, oh, you don't have to call me Mr. Like, just call me. And he gave them his first name. He says, oh, that makes me feel so old. And my kids kind of looked up at me with big eyes because they always put a title in front of somebody's name, right? They aren't really allowed to call adults by their first name. So later, I had to go upstairs and knock on Mr. Jones' door. And I had to explain to him that, all of those kids that you see out at midnight and 1 o'clock in the morning on the corner, and you wonder, like, where are their parents? Where are the people in their lives that are looking out for them? Like, my kids aren't going to be those kids. And they're not going to be those kids because they're your kids too. And they call you Mr. because you're someone who they need to be able to look to for guidance, for encouragement, and who they need to know is holding them accountable, especially when I'm not here. And when your dad's not around. Like, they're 6 and 9 now, but they're going to get old. They're going to be walking to the train by themselves. And I need them to know that when they see you on a street or on the corner or coming up the steps, that you're someone who's looking out for them. So do you mind taking on that responsibility? Because I really need that and my kids really need that. And he was like, oh my God, of course, I'm Mr. Jones. Yes, I get it. But that was a very intentional recruitment of a village member who's not my family. I'm not paying them.
Sure.
He's going to come in handy. And since that time, he's come in handy many times. Just being a neighbor and understanding that I might need support or help. So it's a long way of saying, ask for help, get help. I am the cumulative investment of a lot of people. And we can talk about all of those different people and how they've supported me in my leadership journey, but no one gets anywhere alone.
Alone. Right.
One of the biggest mistakes I think women make is getting almost, I would like to, my friend Katie Orenstein calls it an abuse of virtue. But it's this feeling that I want to really do it on my own, this idea that I'm going to pull myself up on my own bootstraps. Like, it's a very great ideal. But I think sometimes women take that like over the top in a way that's not very healthy. There's nothing wrong with getting help and asking for help. And that's how you manage it.
And I love that because we call that, building your squad, basically, right?
Yes.
Investing in your troops, and it becomes a lot easier, I think, to make that kind of an ask when two things are in check. One, you have to fundamentally believe that you're a worthwhile human being and that you deserve help, right? There's a core self-worth there that's essential.
Yes.
And second, you just have to be willing to reciprocate. People are always astounded by me because I come from grassroots organizing. I started out on the Obama campaign. And so I had to build a statewide organization with nothing, with all volunteers. And we ended up recruiting, training, and managing 200 plus people. And people are like, whoa, you built this organization literally with no other staff but yourself. And now I feel so comfortable asking people to take meaningful action on shared values. Right? It's not actually you're asking for them to do something they don't want to do. You would probably do it in return for them, but you're asking people to be community, in real time. And that means lifting as we climb and supporting one another. So I love that. I think it's so well put. I want to pause here for 1 second and just say we are running out of time soon. We've got about 15 minutes left. So if you have a question for Tiffany, do not delay. Put it in the chat bar here and make sure that you're sending it to everyone. Or if it is private, you can send it just to presenters. I'm seeing a lot of just to presenters stuff coming in. So I just want to be mindful of that differentiation and continue to share with us on Twitter what you're taking away from today's conversation, which I love seeing come in. I want to, in the meantime, while questions are still coming in, you just brought up so many great points, Tiffany. I have a couple of follow-up questions on that. The first is you mentioned the power of perception, especially as a Black female leader. Can you tell us what that experience is and how you have learned what that power of perception can be, and maybe what your philosophy is on how to be that powerful woman that you actually are?
Yeah, no, absolutely. My favorite definition of brand and what a brand is the conversation that people have about you. And it took me a while to understand in my career that I can control that conversation, that I have agency over the conversation that other people have about me, which is counter to what I had always believed, which is I can control what people think about me. And so therefore, I'm not worried about what people think about me. Well, that's a huge deficit and mindset when you're actually trying to advance. I've spent a large part of my career as a fundraiser. So part of my job was instilling enough trust and building enough rapport in my relationship with another person that they would write a really large check to the organization that I was representing. And people don't part with six-figure gifts when the person sitting across the table isn't someone who they feel that they have something in common with, that they feel that they trust, that they feel is credible and authentic and all of the things that we're talking about. I think that what is challenging is because of the way the world works, people often look at us and make assumptions. And people make assumptions no matter who you are at first glance about who you are. And fortunately, I was what I would call racially socialized. In other words, I had parents who, when I was growing up, would say things. I know this is going to sound very harsh to some people, but they would literally say, "You're Black, and therefore life is going to be tougher for you. You're going to have to work harder than other people. You're going to have to be better than other people. And you might not necessarily get the opportunity, not because you're not talented, but because people are just racist." And I know that sounds terrible, but like when I think about how young I was and this like very clear message, but I have to say that was a very important understanding and realization to know that what you really are is different from the way that other people perceive you.
Yes.
And that the way other people perceive you is not always going to be positive, that there's nothing that you've done that's
Right.
wrong, and that part of being successful is helping to, even though it's not fair to you, is helping other people to feel more comfortable with
Mm,
you as a leader and to really help people who have those automatic assumptions, to
sure.
really help them get past their assumptions. And so over time, because I have great mentors and great sponsors and coaches, I've gotten a lot of support and a lot of help with how can I adjust my behavior or my appearance
Right.
or my diction to help people who may have assumptions about me just feel more comfortable with me in a position of power and authority. Because
Right.
the more comfortable that they feel, the easier my job is, right?
Right.
The
Right.
more that I can get out of them, whether it's a gift or whether it's an ask or whether it's, and that's just part of the job. And I think when we talk about authenticity, what's
Mm,
important is to make sure that you're not jeopardizing your own integrity, that you're not jeopardizing who you are in the process of that. And it's important to figure out what are my non-negotiables, right? So
sure.
one of my non-negotiables as a Black woman is I'm not going to straighten my hair, right? I'll wear it short and close to my head because that makes people feel a little bit more comfortable, but I'm not going to put a relaxer in my hair, right?
Right.
So all of us have these negotiables, but I'm going to go ahead and wear like simple studs. I'm not going to wear my big like bamboo hoop around the way the girl, hoop
Yeah.
earrings, even though I really love those because I know that when people see a Black woman and she's got on those big bamboo hoop earrings, it's going to trigger something for them in their
Yeah.
and I don't want that to get in the way of what I'm
Right.
necessarily get from them. So, and there are all kinds of things. The way that I speak, for example, if I was really with my homegirls, I wouldn't even use the word speak. I would just say, I don't be talking like that. But in a situation like this, I'm going to make sure that I
Right.
conjugate all of my verbs and that I speak clearly. So there are all kinds of things that we do. And I think what's important is that we're aware of them,
Right.
that we're conscious
Exactly.
of them, and that we're deliberate about it, and that we feel comfortable with what we're doing,
Mm,
knowing that there's an end game and knowing that there are some things we're not going to compromise on and that are really important to us.
yeah. I love how you put that because I think, first of all, it should be acknowledged that that was a very empathic approach, right? That's a very charitable almost approach to saying, I just want to make you feel comfortable, even though your lack of comfort is pretty much grounded in injustice here.
Yes,
Because I'm sure,
yes,
Sarah Jessica Parker could totally rock those bamboo hoops and you
yes,
would be just fine with it.
yes.
So I love that because it actually echoes what we talk a lot about at Bossed Up Boot Camp, which is our flagship training program for women navigating career transition. And I present a couple of modules there focused on assertive communication. And regardless of, I would say, race and other factors that intersect with gender bias, all women are essentially not seen as very womanly when we are being assertive. But women of color in particular have an extra layer of bullshit, quite frankly, to put up with or sort of to parse through when being assertive boss women. And what we talk about is there is injustice in the world, but that doesn't make us helpless. That doesn't make us helpless in the equation, like you said. And what we're saying is that code switching or trying on different forms of communication is by no means something to feel guilty over. It is a conscious, hopefully, like you're saying, mindful choice of using different tools in your toolbox
Right.
to be a persuasive communicator. And so it just sort of lights me up to hear you in the way you answered that question so beautifully. And our Twitter feed is blowing up with your quotes right now. So thank you for speaking on that. I feel like part of my job here at Bossed Up is to speak truth in this equation, is to be honest and candid. And I really, really appreciate you just joining us in that endeavor. So ladies, we've got time for maybe one more question. I'm seeing some thank yous come in. If you have a question for Tiffany, do not hold back and weigh in now. I'm seeing some come in on our Twitter handle, but make sure that you put them into the chat bar here as well. My last question, Tiffany, was just to branch off of what you mentioned earlier, and that is to tell us a little bit more about this book of yours, if you can. We would love to hear what you are immersed in right now. What's making you tick? What's going on? And what are you most obsessed with at the moment?
Oh, that's so generous of you. I am at the tail end of writing my first book. It's the hardest thing that I've ever done, and I've like pushed two babies out of my body. It's really hard, and I think it's hard because it is part memoir, and because I feel an enormous responsibility to women because of my life's work. I would never ever tell a woman what to do. I respect our journeys far too much for that. So it's just a very delicate balance of sharing my insight and my knowledge and my journey and my experience, but being respectful and mindful and really valuing other people's journey, the reader's journey and the process. It's a book for women, surprise, surprise, but a specific type of woman. It's a book for women who lead complex lives and have high expectations of themselves. I don't know if you know any women like that. It's a book about letting go at home so that you can flourish at work and in life. It's called Drop the Ball: How Women Can Achieve More by Doing Less.
Amazing. So, Tiffany, I'm having a bit of a technical difficulty on my end right now.
Okay.
So forgive me if you're having any kind of a connection issue here with us. I want to just, if you can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
Okay, great. Well, then disregard whatever is happening on my end here. But I wanted to say that Jernell Simmons from Columbia, South Carolina, just asked a great question. And I think we'll wrap on this too. If I get kicked off, I will do my very best to get back on. But to end with this question, how did you get your partner on board when it comes to asking for the help that you need to be a successful boss woman like you are?
Well, that's what I'm trying to answer in the book, right? That's actually a big part of the book, and his role in me being able to drop the ball is a very important part of that, because there's no way that I would be able to do what I do without him. And quite frankly, he does a lot of things that women normally do that make it possible. So he does kind of the detailed things like reading all of the emails from our kids' schools and coordinating their play dates and things like that take up a lot of time. I think the short answer to your question is that I was able to get very clear about what my highest and best use is in achieving what's important to me. And I was able to go to him and not say, I need your help with XYZ chore. I was able to go to him and say, I really need help focusing on my highest and best use to make the world a better place. Like, I really need your help with my life's work of advancing women and girls. And I know that you care about me, and I know that you care about the planet, and I know that you believe in my potential, and that's what I need help for you enabling. And I think that sometimes we get mired like in those kinds of conversations, and I go through the cycles. This was like a very evolved process. You know, I go through the cycle. I mean, I did everything, like just nagging and begging and all of those things. But I think eventually what really mattered in the end was me focusing on what I really cared about in the world and how him doing X, Y, or Z would enable me to be able to do that. People who love you, this is assuming that you're not married to an asshole, right? People who love you and care about you, they really see the magic and the potential that you have, sometimes far greater than you. And they're very invested in supporting you when you can help them to see and understand it in that way. But of course, you've got to be clear about that first.
You got to ask for it. Like, it boils down to so many aspects of women's leadership. I love it. Well, thank you, Tiffany. This has been such an awesome conversation. And I know our community really appreciates your time and talents, and we are so excited to have shared this power lunch with you. Please don't be a stranger. Keep in touch. We will continue to follow you, and I'm excited to read this book of yours next. So you'll have to keep me in the loop on that.
Thank you. You guys have been awesome, and thank you for this opportunity.
My pleasure. And I just want to say thank you also to Tiffany for your part in the amazing Levo League and the work that they do there. I've had the pleasure of working with incredible women like Maxine McCoy at the Levo League and Caroline Gosin, the CEO, who I am honored to sort of thank here. I want to thank you for your part in the incredible Levo 100 list that just came out and included me on the list of performers or
Yes,
incredible sort of millennial leaders who are helping change the world. So
you're amazing, and everyone should
that
go.
list is
Like I said,
badass.
everyone should go to Levo.com and check
Hmm.
out Levo 100 and check out your girl. She's
And
amazing.
and make your profile there because it's an
Yes,
incredible tool. All right, Tiffany, have an incredible rest of your Tuesday. Thank you so
thank
much
you.
to everybody for joining us for Power Lunch, and you'll see more from us real soon.